Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We have been busy. In the month of February, not only was it Black History Month, but it was also Fashion Week. And I don't even know what all the things were, but I was out and about almost every day, sometimes going from one event to the next, really fast and really fabulous. Well, during Fashion Week, one of the places that I visited with great excitement was the fashion show of Frederick Anderson. He is a true visionary in the world of fashion, and I just love seeing his clothes and the presentations that he makes. His understanding of women's wear is sophisticated, and his collections have captivated the industry with their intricate craftsmanship and global influences. So for 10 years, Frederick built a brand with former schoolmate Douglas Hanant, and together they dressed icons like Jennifer Hudson, Janet Jackson, and Beyonce, as well as many, many, many of what we call ladies who lunch. In 2017, Frederick Anderson made the decision to establish his own brand, and he's been growing his eponymous collection ever since. In 2024, he opened his very own storefront on the Upper East Side, perfect location, modeled after his own apartment and personal aesthetic. And just a few months ago, Frederick introduced his collection to women in Puerto Rico to great acclaim. I mean, all kinds of social media buzz. He'll tell us about it. His latest collection for fall 2025 was presented at a ballroom in the Chic Edition Hotel in Times Square. And every aspect of the show, from venue to lighting to fabric to fit and flow, showed his love of the female form. Frederick has redefined modern luxury with his eloquence and daring ideas, and he uses culture, individuality, and couture-inspired designs to tell his stories. Please join me in welcoming the incredibly talented Frederick Anderson.
Hi, how are you? Wasn't that nice?
It's been a feast for the sensations to look at your clothing. And this last collection, Frederick, I love the transparency of a lot of the clothing done in a very sophisticated way. I really think that you have figured out the balance of sexy and sophistication. Can you talk about how you've come to that aesthetic?
It's interesting. I mean, as you know, my background originally when I launched in 97, 98, 1997, 98, I have to clarify, I forget what year we are. That's 20 years ago. It's crazy. I was very much into couture, and in couture at that moment, it was very structured. It was very, literally jackets could stand on their own. I remember when the first season, Douglas, my partner, and I were bought into Bergdorf. I remember me walking the floor and thinking, oh my God, everything was hung in little like suits. So it was the jacket and skirt or jacket and pant. It was exactly how you thought it should be bought. Sometimes it was even labeled and tagged that way. So you couldn't buy the jacket on its own.
That's true. We didn't have separates like we do now. That's true. Right.
Exactly. So to me, the reason that Douglas and I were kind of like the kind of we made such noise was because we went into couture and we made them buy it as separates. And no one really knew what we were doing, but it was the predecessor to where we are now. And I'm proud of being the first in that category. I remember in Bergdorf, we had fights with them. I remember having fights with Tom and there was a buyer there who just was livid, and at the same time they put our clothing into little they had doors on everything, so you had to request the clothing. So you'd have like 5 mannequins in front of your doors, your closets, and then your name was on a closet, and they'd open it up, and it was like neatly like little hung. You have to remember, this is not that long ago, but it was such a different world at Bergdorf's on the 4th floor where we hung, which was couture. Fast forward to now, the reason that's relevant is that I've always been in that noise. I've always been trying to make that statement that women who have influence and women who appreciate luxury have moved. The daughters are no longer like the moms. Those moms 20 years ago bought like that. Well, guess what the daughter wants to do? She wants something new. She wants something cool. She still wants couture. She wants the finishing, but she wants it to fit like her sportswear. She wants it to fit like her athletic wear. She wants to wear it in a different way, and she wants to make all the choices. So women have that power now, which they didn't before. And I am always trying to be in front of the client. So thus, I'm pushing forward in front of her. And I've been working really hard since I launched on how do I take all of those cool couture ideas that I did before and how do I make them more modern? How do I make them more user friendly in the idea of what the woman is looking for now? And when you look at what's happening, she's in better shape, even with Ozempic now. I mean, you know, my clients who were even size 10s are all size 4s. Everyone's a 4 now. I don't need a pattern outside of a 4. It's actually crazy. I feel like you just need a.
Well, I need another size, but you can make it custom for me.
But it just.
I know. I hear you.
It keeps changing. So with that, that's the sheer to me is the idea of celebrating the woman's body, and then on top of that, my first. When I came to New York, I was 16 years old at Joffrey Ballet. So you have to remember my background was the arts. And I celebrate the arts in every movement and everything that I do. It's in my bones. It's in my shows. It's in everything I do celebrates the full wealth of the arts. I played violin. I sang. I danced. I, not only just made clothing, but I was really like this kind of renaissance in the idea I was exercising all of those creative juices that were working in my head. So within my collection comes that as well. So I think that when you ask that question about the use of sheer, it has a lot of layers in it. It has my client in it, it has my journey in it, and it has my understanding of clothing in it.
So that just makes me want to go back to the beginning because this program is Dreamleapers. The whole purpose of Dreamleapers, Frederick, is I bring people on who are manifesting their dreams to inspire people to do the same for themselves. And it very often begins with some seed that was planted when you were a child and, how you kind of nurture that seed. So tell us about your beginnings. Tell us where you're from and all of these steps that you had in the arts. How did that come to be?
It's interesting. So I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. When I was young, I thought all Black people were born in Memphis, by the way. I used to always tell all my friends, oh, I'm from Memphis. All Black people are born from Memphis. I would always say that when I was really, really little. And my mom would say, stop saying that. I was like, but it's true. Everyone I know was born in Memphis. Anyway, so.
Because the world revolved around you.
Exactly. I don't even know what was in my head, but that is just, you're probably right. My crazy brain was in that moment thinking that anyway, so from that point, I grew up in North Carolina. And in North Carolina, the idea of education is incredibly important. Education is everything. My parents believed in education. Everyone in my family, I mean, there's 4 of us. We all went to college, and some of us several colleges, like myself. It's just part of the process for me. It was the learning process. And also with that comes the journey of always reinventing yourself, of learning more. Once you open one door, it leads to another. You know how learning is. You open a door, you read a book, you see a movie, you something, and then all of a sudden it inspires something else opens up in your brain. So to me, I just was very open to that process. Don't ask me why. I mean, I'm just wired that way. So from a young.
Did your parents encourage you to participate in the arts as a child?
Yeah, I mean, every one of us played an instrument. So I played the violin.
I did too, by the way.
What's that?
I played the violin. Yep.
I love that. So I played the violin. My sister played the, what did she play? She played the clarinet, I believe. And then I had another brother who played the cello. And we were kind of like the musical Jacksons, because I did have a big afro.
Did you play together?
No, we never played together. So I'm the baby, and I'm like 8 years younger than my brother. So
you're almost like an only child.
I grew up like an only child, but to exhausted parents because they went through 3 other. So basically they were like, because I made straight A's, they were like, as long as you keep your A average up, you can do whatever you want. So I literally was never home. So I went to home ec class, I sewed, I went to ballet class, I played violin, I was the head of the student council, I was the president of the I mean, I just did everything that was ludicrous. I was number 33 in the state in math. I don't know if you know that. In my strange, real crazy world, I don't know how my math brain, and it's relevant to me now.
Actually, So I was about to say
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense to me, Frederick, because one thing, when you look at clothing up close, not just on the runway, but when you go in a store and look at clothing and turn it inside out and see how clothing is made, that's when
Right.
you know if it's a true craftsman. And that is mathematical.
It
That
is
is
100%.
mathematical. And I remember going into your store, your beautiful store, and just handling different garments that were perfectly hung on the hangers. And, it's my thing. I turn it inside out to look at those
100%.
seams,
I do
and
too.
they're exquisite.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can see the math in it.
Well,
Absolutely.
it is. I mean, I have to do, speaking of, I'm in my boutique right now and I'm having a delivery. So I have to do one thing. Susie, the guys at the front door. See,
Very
and so, yeah, yeah. So I work this kind of interesting thing in my head because there's several things going on. I see the body in dimensional state. It's my, I was really always good at geometry, and I literally am very good at seeing the full 360 of garments. And I work that way. So, and it makes sense if you think about it in the formula of how I think of women's bodies and dance. And when you think of the geometry, and I've excelled in geometry, and all of it kind of makes sense in my crazy head. It also goes back to violin if you think about it.
Yeah.
People have shown that people who play violins and in music are better at math. For some reason, it works the same part of the brain. So I do think it does connect. And the idea of my upbringing is that I had a lot of heroes when I was young. I had people who saw my talent and told me to keep moving. And that to me is what's interesting. They kept telling me to keep going. So I had an amazing teacher when I was in junior high. I had two really amazing. In middle school, I had this great teacher, Miss Hastings, who first was like, you have the best voice and whatever, and I sang and whatever, and she would like encourage me. And then I met another teacher who was amazing. Her name was Mrs. Parsons, and this is important in life, is that you have to have people who kind of find you and help you to identify your journey. And kind of like, especially when you're forming, you need people to say, you know what, you have a gift. And if you don't have people that way in your life, you need to find them, because I do think that's
I could
important.
not agree with you more. It doesn't matter how strong you are, but having somebody to see you, to really
Right.
see, wow, I see this in you, and to reinforce that makes all the difference in the world.
It was the journey. And so like Miss Parsons, who like actually she saw something bigger, and she's the one who I credit to a lot of my original like ego, since building up your ego, because ego is important. People put down people with egos. You have to have an ego, like especially as a Black person in America. You have to have an ego. You have to have a strength. You have to have something, a self-belief system that's going to carry you through when people are like not hearing you or putting you down or putting you in corners or making you feel like you're something that you're not. You have to have an ego force that drives you, and you have to have a God force. There's two things you need: ego force, God force, and then you have to have the energy to keep moving forward. But like Mrs. Parsons was amazing, and she was the one that kept telling me, "You were so smart. Don't forget your homework. Don't forget your this." And she would not let me go sing and do anything unless I maintained. She was worse than my dad. She was like, "You cannot." I was like in the choir, and I was like, going to all county and whatever. And she was like, no, you can't go because you got a 95 and you're usually 97. I mean, that's how tough she was.
Oh,
She was like, she was
like
the real deal. I loved her for that. But I loved her for that because of the reality is that at home, I really, as much as my mother was a driving force, my mother was a little, as I said, I hate to say worn out, but I was the fourth kid. And she was starting a real estate company, and she was in her own force at that point. And then my dad was in the military, and he was traveling the whole time. He was an officer, and he trained troops. He was in Vietnam, Korea, wherever. He was always gone. So I created my own kind of world cocoon based on my own, the input of so much knowledge and input of so many different people. But I credit Ms. Parsons of having the force to tell me, don't forget your studies. Don't forget the knowledge. You're going to need the knowledge later. And and it's a beautiful thing she gave me, which is this quest for knowledge. I use it constantly. When something sparks me as something I need to find out or learn, I go deep in it. I think it's an important thing, the curiosity and the need for knowledge.
No question. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are on a journey with fashion designer Frederick Anderson. I didn't know Frederick was from Memphis. He's got all these incredible stories. We are diving into his journey as a fashion designer, which is always fascinating to me to hear how people got to where they are today. So Frederick, you just said a couple of things that just clicked for me. So my father, who was the class valedictorian at his college, and I'm named for him. He was Harry Cole. I'm Harriette Cole. I wanted to be as great as he. I remember one time coming home and I had a 98 on a test, and very sternly, I was in the 7th grade, very sternly, he looked at me and he said, "Where are the other 2 points?" And I was like, "Daddy, this is a good grade." I was mad at him, but later I realized that, his point was, why leave anything on the table? If you have 2 points left on the table, why leave them on the table? And that certainly has driven me to excel. My sisters and I were taught this: you must always do your best.
It's the story of every successful Black person I know. We deliver at such a high level
Too.
And that's why I appreciate as you notice, I surround myself, all my friends, I surround myself with very strong, very successful Black people, because it's part of what takes me through the journey, is reminding myself I'm not the only one. Because when I was young in North Carolina, I was the only one. Zero me. It was me running around. It was little Frederick, like always. I didn't know I was breaking barriers, but I just thought I was like you. Just I had to get those extra 2 points. I always I'm going to be the smartest one. I'm going to be the best in ballet. I'm going to be the best violinist. I mean, I was just always driven that for whatever reason, and probably subconsciously it was the idea that I knew I was the only Black face in the room. And I looked around me and I knew the opportunity that I had. Now, I didn't look at it as a default. I looked at it as an opportunity. I thought, wow, I'm so different. I'm like no one, So to me, my little crazy, strange Michael Jackson ego, I was thinking that, like, with my big afro, I'm like Frederick. I am hot. I am like, this is me at 16 years old. I can sing. I make a 99. I was just like, I don't know where the hell I got this confidence from, but it drove me through so much, So then I went,
It's interesting that as you say that, Frederick, because for people who don't know you and know your clothes, well, unless they know it's your clothes, they don't know that they're made by a Black man. Let's start there. Your client,
thank God.
Yeah.
Bravo.
They don't. Your clientele, I'm assuming, is largely not Black. It's diverse,
Right.
and I could imagine that navigating in those spaces sometimes can be a challenge, because as a Black man walking into the space, there's a who do you think you are, and why are you here? But you're having been the only for so long. Did that help to make it an easeful journey into this space?
I mean, I just never saw myself as any lesser than anyone else. In fact, I forever, and this is the journey with people who support you, as opposed to the journey with people who don't, is that I was always told that I was gifted, so I always assumed I was. When you assume your gifts, you see them more obviously in front of you. And that, I think, is the gift that we need to tell more people, is that people need positive enforcement. People need to be told when they're doing something great over and over again, because that's going to be the blossom of the next generation, is finding the people who it's not just having ideas and not just having creativity, not just having the forethought of doing something. It's having the support system to lift that up. That is the hardest thing to find. It literally is the hardest. It's like the gray area that no one talks about in the world. It's interesting. I mean, I was thinking about this funny story of this girl, Edith Fung. So I was a violinist, and the reason I gave up violin is because Edith Fung and I were in violin. I remember we went to, I mean, this is so crazy story, but it's significant in my life. Edith Fung and I went to like the all county. So Edith was also a math. She was like number 32. I was number 33 in the state. And so we went to the math festival. This is so crazy. At New York State University, all the most talented mathematicians in North Carolina. We all went up there, and Edith Fung placed. I was so mad because Edith Fung, when we did violin, Edith Fung, I was the second violin. So Edith would go, I go, do, do. You know, I was always just like, Edith Fung kills me in everything. Isn't that the funniest thing? And I actually looked up after college because I just thought, I said, my whole childhood was trying to compete with you. And I want to thank you for that, because I, for the first time, had someone I challenged myself with in a loving challenge. Because, you know, I loved her to death, but little Edith Fung just kicked my ass. And I loved her. And
what did she end up doing? What is she doing with her life?
She was at the San Francisco Symphony. She followed. Wow. Yeah, no, brilliant violinist. Anyway, but it just, the irony, the reason that's important is this idea of we propel ourselves forward. We take our own challenges. We meet our own challenges if we put ourselves those challenges in front of us. So what happened at that point is that the best thing I ever did was give a violin, but I was a tiny little kid, 5'6", and then all of a sudden, when I turned 15, I grew 5 inches. It was crazy overnight. And then like I was dancing at the same time, and dancing became my focus. So I switched to dancing. Well, I got a scholarship to North Carolina School of the Arts, a private school down in North Carolina, a boarding school. So I went away to school. So I left for school in the 11th grade. So, and I finished school at North Carolina School of the Arts and excelled. I mean, I was a great dancer. So at North Carolina School of the Arts, I was recruited by 2 ballet companies, Zurich Ballet and Joffrey Ballet. I decided, well, actually 3, because San Francisco Ballet really wanted me. My mom knew I was gay, and she was like, at the time, if you don't remember, late 80s, the AIDS crisis, she was like, you are not going to San Francisco. Absolutely not. Okay. She probably saved my life because I wanted to go to San Francisco Ballet.
She made it. That's true.
Literally saved my life. Literally. I ended up in New York at Joffrey Ballet. And so I didn't make it because of 6 months into it, I destroyed my knee. The problem with the structure that I have, having my genealogical background, is as a Black man, my knees are very much more straightforward. They're a little knob-kneed. They're not so open. You know, I don't know if you know the logistics of ballet, but you know, the reason that's very focused on a lot of like Asian or Northern Europe, Eastern European is the flatter hips. So you have the turnout. So as a Black person, when our hips are much more narrow and it pushes forward, we end up destroying our knees and our hips trying to make these shapes. Anyway, it's horrible. So there's such a challenge for Black dancers to work in ballet. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a structural thing. It's literally structural. There's nothing I can do about it. My feet also.
Like somebody like a football injury for a particular reason, you had a ballet injury that benched you. Yeah.
So, but while I was benched, I decided I was going to, a friend of mine Cats was on Broadway at that time. It was 88, 89. He was like, oh, Cats is looking for dancers. You can sing and you can dance. Why don't you go do Cats? I said, that's crazy. I knew, you know, and me and my strange head was like, I used to always tell my mom, which I forgot, that I would be on Broadway by the time I was 21. Well, guess what? I auditioned for Cats and I got Cats. So craziness. So I left Joffrey Ballet and I went and I was in Cats for 2.5 years. I played McCavity.
On Broadway ever. Right.
So anyway, but I started on the national tour and came back to New York. And and then when I came back to New York, I auditioned. Someone had seen me, Susan Stroman, who started Crazy for You on Broadway, and she asked me to come in and sing and dance for her, and she hired me. So I ended up in the Tony-winning show Crazy for You. So I'm in the original cast. I'm on the album. So talk about This is Dreamleapers. Here's your show.
Well, look, my mouth is hanging open. I'm like, I don't know these things. These are incredible stories.
I did a movie. I was on a soap opera, and that's how I know Billy Porter and all these people from the from the industry when I was there in the early 90s. We actually were at the Tonys together. I was in Crazy for You, and I think he was doing not Jellies, he was doing Five Guys Named Mo. And I remember we were up against Tonys, were up against each other, and we won. I still never let him forget it, even though he won. He won. I won that moment.
I love that. But you know what? It's interesting. Speaking of Billy, he is such a hardworking professional, and people see him and his larger than life presentation. But if you look at what it takes,
tragic life story. He's had so many hardships. I remember even after that moment, I mean, not to side rail, but we've been friends for a long time. I remember several times he'd come back to New York and literally not just bankrupt, but like he lost his voice. There's so many things that happened with him and so many upstarts that came and then dropped and then came, dropped. I mean, it was just, but that's what happens when you're an individual. So anyway, so on my journey, I'm in Crazy for You now, and we won the Tony '92, I think, something like that. So then I'm in Crazy for You on Broadway, and then I meet Douglas. Douglas and I, we ended up being a couple, and he was talking about fashion. I was like, oh, I always loved fashion. I used to sew since the time I was a little kid, and I hadn't even entertained it in a million years. And I was like, wouldn't that be cool? And he was like, yeah. He was at Barney's at the time. And he was the display director under Simon Doonan. So we both decided, the two of us, once again, not having any filters of telling me I can't do things. He was like, we should do fashion. He was like, like whatever. So he was like, I'm going back to FIT. And I said, I'm going to go back to FIT too. So we went back to FIT because he already had a degree as well in art history, because he was an artist as well. So we're going to get our fashion degrees. I don't even know why. Crazy. I did not get a degree, but I took classes. And while I would take classes during the day when I was doing shows at night. So I would, and which is what you do in life when you're 20 something years old. I mean, I was on Broadway at 21. So between that and 27, I spent all these years trying to find myself while I was successful. Do you know what I mean? Because the success came at an early part just of dream jumping, like just deciding I want to do this, and each one of them were successful, but it ended me up in a place where it wasn't who I was just there, if that makes sense to you. Talented, not the most talented kid in the room, but talented. Do you know what I mean? And when I was on Broadway. But
part of that, Frederick, is it's interesting. When you have multiple talents, sometimes it can be difficult to choose. If you're good at one thing, then they can be in that lane. But when you have multiple things that you're good at, you do have to choose. At least
you tend to one at a time. You choose one at a time. That's what I did. I exercised each journey, and I went through each journey, and through each journey, I became a better Frederick.
Yep.
I mean, through that journey, my dad and I stopped talking for 2.5 years because I had a scholarship to MIT myself when I was at North Carolina School of the Arts, because I went to the math festival. Little behold, I went to North Carolina School of the Arts, and I get a letter while I'm at the School of the Arts, because I left, because I'd gone to the math festival the end of the 10th grade. And then I took the PSAT. I scored ridiculously high. And then and I got an offer from MIT while I was at North Carolina School of the Arts dancing. So my dad is like, okay, you were going to MIT. And I was like, I'm already down a road, Dad. It's not happening. And so, once again, that could have been a choice. I'm glad I didn't.
I'm sure you understand that why your father was like, boy, come on now. What? Hey, let me remind folks, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are traveling along the journey of fashion designer Frederick Anderson, but really, he's fashion designer now. He has been violinist, ballet dancer. He was possibly headed to MIT because of that math brain of his, but instead it all kind of goes into design. But thank you all for tuning in, because we're having a great conversation right now. Frederick, I want to ask you something else, because you're from the South, from Memphis, and then you grew up in North Carolina, and you said your parents knew that you were gay. In the South, a Black man in the South, when you were growing up as a young gay man, How were you received? Because the South can be extremely conservative, and the Black community can be very judgmental. So what was that like for you?
Well, first of all, it wasn't in a Black neighborhood. My neighborhood, because we were military and we were officers, it was very mixed. So, and it was very upper middle class and whatever. My mother owned she had started a real estate company, was very successful, whatever. So they, it wasn't, I didn't feel it so much. And also I wasn't like, I'm not the type that was like, I never went through a period where I wanted to be, very feminine or anything like that. I've always been in fact, at that period, I was very preppy. So I used to like wear like pink and green and like khakis and whatever. I was like so North Carolina that there was no difference. So like most gay people in America, I was just Frederick. Gay was because of my sexual preference, not because I had a lifestyle. So it's only now that we discuss gay as if it's a lifestyle, but I never thought of it as a lifestyle, so I was never not gay. So whenever anyone asked me if I was ever in the closet, I'm like, no, I don't remember being in the closet because I never had that catharsis where I had to feel like I was in the closet. And when I was 16, I was so driven with my success of whatever I was doing at the time that I wasn't really overly chasing boys or anything like that. I was never in that noise. And then if you think about the journey that I had, I met Douglas at 22.
Oh, so you were a baby.
Do you know what I mean? And I was with Douglas until I was 46.
Wow. Okay.
Does that give you the journey for me? So yeah. I didn't have the journey of most gay men running around and exercising that part of my life. My life was all about work and all about driving myself in different things. So when you ask that question, it's interesting because I've thought about it because people ask, and it's like it's interesting because even in the journey of finding my Blackness, which we'll get to, and grappling with that understanding for myself, which is also a journey through that same process because I never, when I was young, dealt with it very much because I wasn't in a situation where I felt any different. And I don't know how to explain that. It's what the gift of the military life gives you when you're in these cocoons that are based on, how great your dad did. Right. If you were enlisted or officer, or as you grew, your dad, you got, it was like you're in a better community. You're in a better group of people. It was based on merit. So my life was always, my dad treated us like we were based on merit. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I grew up in a life built with building my merit. Making myself better was the choice, not thinking of that. And I never had a default of thinking of like either gay or Black being an issue, because I was always like, my dad would be just like, you're Frederick, you're powerful, like get it done. Mm-hmm. And so he always told me, and the thing he did that taught me one thing, I remember I had asthma when I was young, and I remember my dad, he was injured in war. He had like some really bad issues. And I remember he couldn't cut the lawn. And he was like, you need to go cut the lawn. I have asthma. I was like, my mom was like, he cannot cut the lawn. My dad gets, yes, he can. He can go cut the lawn. And I remember the thought, at first I was so mad at him, but then I appreciated him so much. It'll make me very emotional. I appreciate him so much for making me go out and do that, for making me fight through it and proving. And he used to always say, you're a man. You go out and you do that. This is what you have to do as a man. Sometimes things are not easy and it's not tough. You're going to cough. You're not going to die. You're going to go out and you're going to do this. It's part of your journey and part of the things you need to learn. Everything isn't just wonderful. Some things hurt. Some things have pain. And the pain is part of the journey. And he taught me that. And that's the gift to me he gave me. And that has nothing to do with like being gay or Black or whatever. It's being a person of merit and person of full growth and understanding that there are no gifts in life without pain. And it's also the Christian bringing that I have that teaches us that, every journey isn't just all wonder. It's not all glorious. It isn't all doves flying around. The doves come because of you realize your personal journey and what you went through to get to that moment. And that's the celebration. It isn't the moment. It's the celebration that I did it. And I still do that. So in my journey, that's what's important to me always. And I gift my dad to that because I was so mad at him so many times things like that. But now I appreciate it. The time you come in and make us make up our beds and top a nickel on the bed and see if it bounced. I was just like, really? We are not in the military. And, you know, I'm a brat. I've always been a brat. I was like, we are not in the military. My dad would be like, do you want me to slap you? I was like, Dad, we are just not in the military. Why are we doing this? Later on, guess what? My house is impeccable. I think that, like, there is something to the idea that the value system of that, how we treat ourselves in the world that we live in, and how we put, like, you know, what is accomplishment? Do you know what I mean? What is accomplishment and what does it mean to you? I think those are the things that we need to answer to create success. And it's for the wrong reason. Success will not come to us.
Sure. I want to dig a little deeper in this notion of when you claimed your Blackness. Because, you know, today we are living in a time when Blackness is being challenged the way it was 50 years ago. And yet, you know, we were just at that event at FIT talking about the power of imagery. And one of the things that I believe it was Deborah Martin Chase said is, this is not the first time when we've been challenged. This is, you know, we had a period when we were welcomed in a way that is probably, it was really nice. It was really nice that there were more doors opening than being slammed in our face. But I'm curious for you, especially the way you're describing your father telling you life and achievement are based on merit. How did Blackness figure into that? And what is your understanding of your Blackness today?
No, I'll tell you, the first time I really felt insulted and being told that I was Black and I came to a reality was when I was doing Cats in the National. I was in Chicago and I was playing the lead. And here I am on the front cover of all the papers playing McCavity. And I remember I was walking down the street with a good friend of mine, Cindy Klinger, who was playing one of the girls that sang McCavity, the song about me. And I remember we were walking and she had a full-length fur on. She's a beautiful girl. And the two of us walking down the street. And I'll remember this group of guys in a car driving by this Chicago and screaming, "Hey, nigger, what are you doing with that beautiful girl?" And it just, I don't even know how I got so paralyzed. I stopped. And I realized my whole upbringing in the South had never prepared me for going to Chicago in the North. And I just was like, here I am in a big city where I think that there's progress and whatever. And I realized Chicago is a racist town. I have a great aunt who just passed away who used to tell me, she said, Chicago is very racist. But it was one of those onslaughts when no matter all your success, when someone says something like that, you're belittled down to something inside of you that I didn't even know existed, that almost wanted to cry at that spot. And it just paralyzed me. And I stood there. And my friend Cindy came to my defense and just started screaming at them, but I had nothing to say. I literally had nothing to say. I don't even know how to explain how paralyzed I was. And I went home and I cried for 3 days. And I would go to the show and I would cry after the show. And it hit me so hard because all of a sudden I was like, wow, like, you know, you through the process of knowledge, we're told to better ourselves. We're never told that no matter how much we better ourselves, there will be people who want to see us however they see us. And that's the knowledge that came at that moment. Came crushing down at me. Went back to New York, and Brian Stokes Mitchell. He used to be, you know, of course, yeah, good friend, very good friend of mine. So I was doing a show off Broadway. I forgot, this is a horrible show, but I was the lead, and he was doing next door to me. He was doing oh my God, what show was he doing? Forgot what show he was doing. Anyway, but he and Allison and I had just been doing a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum on the road. We did it out at La Jolla Playhouse with Des McAnuff, and we were waiting to go back on the road, and it's this crazy story. But so I auditioned for West Side Story on Broadway. And I got the show, and I was so excited. I got the show, and I didn't get a contract. At the same time, Allison, who ended up marrying Brian Stokes, she's Allison Mitchell now, still a very good friend.
Yeah, I love Allison. We were in Jack and Jill together.
Yes, she was Jack and Jill. We always talked about the South and Jack and Jill. She couldn't believe I was never part of any of it. She was like, "How are you not?" She said, "You are like." I said, "I don't know."
There's Jack and Jill, mom.
Oh my God, I love her more than anything in the world. Anyway, but one of my close friends. But anyway, so she had auditioned also for Will Rogers Broadway, Tommy Tune. And same thing had happened. She auditioned. They told her she got it. Basically, her manager, my manager at the time, told me I had West Side Story. She supposedly had Jelly's Last Jam, not Jelly's Last Jam, Will Rogers Broadway. Neither of us got contracts. And we were like, what happened? But all of our white friends got contracts. And so it was one of those moments, once again, this is what builds to the story that when you realize, and it's this power that didn't tear me down, it lifted me up, and I took it. It's like taking notes in your life. It doesn't stop you on the journey. You just take notes. The hits hit you hard. Well, we started what is now a great community within the equity. Allison and I started. We took them to court. So we started the first diversity movement within Actors Equity, Allison and I. And we got Will Rogers immediately announced that they would hire more Black performers. Allison ended up in the show. There was another little girl, Gwen, who ended up in the show. And the irony is like, when you look at Jerome Robbins, only dated Black men and didn't put Black men in his show. It's an irony of, a great, interesting story. And he was fighting it in court saying that, like, in our arbitration, it never really went to court as arbitration. The union did arbitration. But and that committee still stands right now within equity that, like, oversees contracts and makes sure we changed everything. We made it so that they had to review because they were using it as an opportunity to say, because there weren't Blacks in the 20s or Blacks in the 40s, we didn't have to put Blacks in our show. And we kind of fought them back in the idea that Broadway is not reality. It's a heightened idea, and we're supposed to use it for storytelling and for the advancement of a conversation. And if you're not using it for that, then why are we doing it? We're not doing historical references on Broadway, unless you're doing a show about historical references, but it makes no sense. Anyway, that was the first major change. And
when was that?
92, I think 93, something like that. And it was an important moment for me because it was like, we took it upon Allison and I, we were like, we're going to make this happen. We rallied people together and we got it to happen. And it made a big difference. So I think, I look back and
it's incredible. And Frederick, the thing is that I love you taking us on this journey so we can see what it was like for you, and the irony that you didn't have these experiences when you were in the South. You had these experiences in the North.
and Billy Porter and I talk about it. We would go into auditions, and this is how ridiculous it was. This is where the anger came from, why I said, we're going to do something about this within the equity. Was I would go to auditions. I remember when I went to the soap opera, all of the white characters had names. I was Doctor. Black Doctor. I was literally Black Doctor. And I had a recurring role that was the Black Doctor. So I remember one time I went in for a movie and they had left all the ends of the words. They were like, "Dad be walking down the street." And they had left all the end of and I said to the director, I said, "You know what, if I choose this dialect, it's my opportunity to choose that dialect. How dare you?" Of course, I didn't get the role. I said, "How dare you give me a script where I can't even read it?"
Right. Oh my
God. Hello, I have a degree. I don't need you to tell me. I can make a choice on how to present this to you. And
when we have to stand up, sometimes you just have to stand up, even if it means that you're not going to get a role, because you have to stand up for what's right.
Well, that was a chance when I was like so humiliated. I was sitting there. I said, "I don't even know how to read this." He said, "Well, it's a dialect." I said, "Are you really kidding me right now?" I said, I can't even read this. Literally, they left words out, and I'm supposed to put it together in a sentence. Like, I'd be walking down. I was like, people don't talk like that. I'm from the South. I'm like, what are you talking about? North Carolina has the most colleges of any state in the U.S. Like, I don't talk like this. It's horrifying.
Well, Yeah, no, I hear you. Let folks know we're almost at the end, but just reminding you, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking with Frederick Anderson, going down many paths to really get a sense of, what life can be like and the choices that we have to make. And Frederick, I worked with Earl Graves, the founder of Black Enterprise, some years ago. He was traveling around the country with his book, How to Succeed in Business Without Being White. That was the title.
Yeah, love it.
And it was incredible. I produced special events for him all over the country. And one of the things that he talked about, and he had worked for Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy.
Mhm.
And he said that he learned from Kennedy, that you sometimes have to stand in harm's way, that sometimes your job in life is to stand up and let people understand what's right, stand for what's right, even if it means that an opportunity may not come your way, because we have to have the courage and the fortitude to stand up for what's right. And if we are excellent at whatever it is that we do, then very often it will work either to our advantage or to the next person in life.
Right. Always not about us. Anyway, just to move it forward, because I know we are going to run out of time. I'll tell you that the whole the end of this journey is that when I launched Douglas Hannett, it was Anderson Hannett. And it was Anderson Hannett. Well, you knew this, but it launched as Anderson Hannett. That was the name of our company. And it was the name of the company for all 23 years was Anderson Hannett. I chose to take my name off of it. And because Douglas was beautiful, white, like very connected socially and like in New York and whatever. And I thought he was a better brand leader.
Hmm. And then
and there were no Black designers for me to look at to say that it was a possibility for me to exist. And so therefore I punished myself for years for that, because when we became successful, all of a sudden I was doing everything. I was not just running it. I was designing with I did every fitting. The gift of all of that is behind the scenes. I did every fitting. I met every woman. I became integral in the fashion industry on the side that matters, which is the clients. Everyone forgets that's why we're here. I became very connected within the social world in New York by dressing everyone. I dress, and people forget, I know the Trumps. Everyone always, a lot down in the background, a lot of people know this about me. Ivana Trump's a very good friend. She walked my first runway show. Ivanka, her mother, was my client. I used to go to their house in Palm Beach and go, on Jungle Road and go up here in New York to their townhouse on 63rd and Fitter. I have a history that you would not believe. If you name a name, in New York society, I probably dressed them or know them and been to their house and whatever. And at one point, I was on the 500 list on the Upper East Side, which for years actually. And then the 400 of most important, I was always on that list. And then Douglas and I broke up. We broke up because honestly, he didn't have the power to get to make it over the finish line. Just everyone can't take the journey with you. He couldn't take the journey with me because it got really, really hard. Madoff happened. We went bankrupt. We were in some 30-something stores between Neiman's and Saks, big business. It just imploded. Literally overnight, we had hundreds of $1 million in bills, and he just imploded. And he became, unfortunately became substance abuse and whatever in not only our personal life, but the company destroyed. Irony is in all of that, I was called by Matthew Mellon, who started Jimmy Choo, who happened to be a good friend of mine. And we used to go out, really a party drinking friend, and asked me to run his company with him, Hanley Mellon, with his new wife, which I ran for 2 years almost. But that unfortunately didn't end well. But it was the first time I realized, Frederick, you've got to take this upon yourself. And to end that story, I launched my first collection called Black Like Me. And the reason I did that was because I finally was ready to be Frederick. And so the culmination of my story is exactly the right way it's been. At 50 years old, I launched Black Like Me, which finally tells my story, and that's where I am now.
And what a story. And the clothing, again, is just so sophisticated and elegant and sexy and sensual. Those and there's a lot of noise, as you said, out here in terms of what the offerings that are made. what you showed this particular season was just exquisite. And so how can people, where is your store and how can people see your clothes?
I'm going to be launching this year. So as you know, I'm part of Saks, which is that was part of the journey why I opened the store, because it imploded this year. And so, and I was very distributed through Saks. So now I'm starting my own engine, the store being the first opportunity to get sales here on 31st and Park. But then obviously I'm going to be launching an online store and more. But I'm still sold through some boutiques all over the country. So I say the best thing is to get on my Instagram, DM me, and come see me in New York. So
wonderful. Well, congratulations. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. That was delightful to hear so many great things about you. And hey guys, when you touch the clothes, make sure you turn them inside out and look at how they're made. It's really spectacular. Thank you, Frederick Anderson. Thank you so much.
Great seeing you, Harriette. All right. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.